Imagine you are fast asleep, and suddenly a voice echoes in your mind. A strange image appears before your eyes, so vivid that even after you wake, your body is still trembling. What would you think? Just an ordinary dream, or something greater trying to speak to you? Thousands of years ago, people in the Bible asked that very same question, and the answer changed the course of human history. A man once dreamed that the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to him. Because of that dream, his own brothers threw him into a pit and sold him into slavery. Yet that very dream eventually lifted him to a throne, placing him in charge of an entire empire. That man was Joseph, and his story is only one of dozens of dreams recorded in the Bible, each one a piece of a vast picture through which God guides humanity. Some dreams come as warnings, some arrive as promises, and some come to completely transform a person's destiny, even the fate of an entire nation. In today's video, we will journey through every dream recorded in the Bible, from the Old Testament to the New Testament, to understand what they truly meant, and why, even to this day, they are still remembered. Part 1. The Dreams of Abraham and Jacob, when God first spoke through sleep. The story of dreams in the Bible begins very early, in the opening pages of Genesis, when humanity had not yet clearly understood the boundary between the visible and the invisible. And the first person to receive a message from God through sleep was none other than Abraham, the one known as the father of faith. At that time, Abraham was in an intensely troubled season. He had just come through a war and rescued his nephew Lot from the hands of enemies. Yet his heart was still weighed down by an unspoken chinta. He was old, his wife Sarai had not borne him a child, and God's promise of descendants as countless as the stars still seemed distant, almost suspended in uncertainty. Then one night God spoke to him in a vision, not through ordinary speech, but in a state somewhere between dream and waking. The voice told him to look up at the sky and count the stars if he could. So would his descendants be. And strangely enough, Abraham believed. He did not question, did not demand proof, he simply believed. And the Bible records that this faith was credited to him as righteousness. But the dream of that night did not end there. After a mysterious ritual in which Abraham cut animals in half and arranged them opposite each other, a deep sleep fell upon him, and a thick, dreadful darkness overwhelmed him. In that state, God revealed the future of an entire people. His descendants would be strangers in a foreign land, enslaved for 400 years, but they would eventually be set free and return with great possessions. This is the first time in the Bible that a dream carries not only a message for one person, but the destiny of a nation not yet born. Several generations later, Abraham's grandson Jacob would experience a night he could never forget. He was on the run from his brother Esau after deceiving him to take both the birthright and their father's blessing. Alone, with nothing in his hands but a staff and a heart burdened with guilt, he lay down in the wilderness, using a stone as his pillow, and he dreamed. In that dream, he saw a ladder reaching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending on it. At the top stood God, who declared that he would be with Jacob wherever he went, would protect him, and would bring him back to that land. When Jacob awoke, he trembled and said that this place was fearful, for it was none other than the house of God, the very gate of heaven. He took the stone he had used as a pillow, set it up as a memorial pillar, poured oil on it, and named that place Bethel, meaning house of God. What is striking is that Jacob was not a perfect man at that moment. He was running from the consequences of his own actions. And yet God chose the darkest night of his life to appear to him. It is as if the dreams in the Bible do not come to those who are worthy, but arrive precisely when people need them most. Part 2. Joseph's Dreams, when a dream sparks a tragedy. If there is one figure in the Bible whose life is most deeply intertwined with dreams, it is Joseph, the 11th son of Jacob. His story is one of the longest and most detailed in the entire book of Genesis, and it begins with two dreams that a 17-year-old boy unwisely shared with his entire family. The first dream is simple, yet rich in symbolism. Joseph sees himself and his brothers binding sheaves of grain in the field. Suddenly his sheaf rises and stands upright, while the sheaves of his brothers gather around and bow down to it. When he tells them, they immediately grasp its meaning. Their question is not what the dream means, but whether he truly intends to rule over them. And from that moment, jealousy begins to smolder. Not stopping there, Joseph has another dream. This time he sees the sun, the moon, and 11 stars all bowing down to him. When he shares this dream, even his father Jacob rebukes him, asking whether he means that his father, mother, and brothers will all bow before him. Yet despite the rebuke, the Bible records a subtle detail. Jacob keeps these words in mind. It is because of these two dreams that Joseph's brothers decide to act. One day when Joseph is sent by his father to check on them as they tend their flocks far away, they see him coming from a distance, and a plot begins to form. At first they intend to kill him, but then they choose instead to throw him into a dry pit and sell him to passing slave traders. Joseph is taken down to Egypt, his hands bound, without a coin to his name, and without a single familiar face beside him. Everything seems to prove that those dreams were nothing more than the illusions of a naive boy. But in Egypt, Joseph's life continues to turn in ways no one could have imagined. He is sold to an official named Potiphar, and then, after being falsely accused, he is thrown into prison. Just when all hope seems lost, he meets two former servants of Pharaoh in the prison. One night, both men have troubling dreams that no one can explain. Joseph steps in and does what his entire life has been preparing him to do. He interprets their dreams with a certainty that comes from somewhere deeper than any human knowledge. And it is that very ability, those very years of suffering and humiliation, that lead him to the day he stands before Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler in the world at that time, to interpret dreams that will change the destiny of an entire empire. Part 3. Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams, a dream that saves the world. That night Pharaoh could not rest, or rather, he slept, but was drawn into another world by images so strange that when morning came, he awoke deeply unsettled. He dreamed that he was standing by the Nile River. From the water came 7 cows, sleek and well-fed. Then 7 other cows emerged, gaunt and ugly, and they devoured the 7 healthy ones. Then he woke up. He fell asleep again and dreamed once more. This time he saw 7 full, plump ears of grain growing on a single stalk, followed by 7 thin, withered ears that swallowed up the healthy ones. Pharaoh awoke a second time, knowing that something important was hidden within these visions. He summoned all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, but none could explain the dreams. At that moment, the chief cupbearer suddenly remembered a young Hebrew man in prison who, 2 years earlier, had interpreted his dream with perfect accuracy. Joseph was brought out of the dungeon, shaved, changed his clothes, and was led before Pharaoh. When Pharaoh recounted his dreams, Joseph did not hesitate. He said at once that the 2 dreams were one and the same, and that God was revealing what was about to happen in Egypt. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 full ears of grain represented 7 years of abundance, while the 7 gaunt cows and the 7 thin ears represented 7 years of famine that would follow, so severe that people would forget the years of prosperity as if they had never existed. What makes this dream remarkable is not only its message, but the fact that it was repeated twice. Joseph explained that God repeated the dream because the matter had been firmly decided and would happen soon. This becomes a pattern seen throughout the Bible. When a message is repeated, it is a sign that it is certain and demands immediate attention. Pharaoh not only believed the interpretation, but also recognized that there was no one as discerning and wise as the man standing before him. That very day, Joseph was appointed governor over all Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. A slave, a prisoner, within a matter of hours, became the second most powerful man in the greatest empire of that time. During the 7 years that followed, Joseph gathered and stored grain from across Egypt. Then the 7 years of famine came, exactly as the dream had foretold, spreading not only through Egypt, but into the surrounding lands. And it was this famine that forced Joseph's brothers to travel to Egypt in search of food, only to stand before the very brother they had once sold, without recognizing him. The circle had come full turn. What began as 2 dreams of a 17-year-old boy had, in the end, become reality. Part 4. Warning Dreams. When God speaks to prevent disaster. Not every dream in the Bible carries a promise or a revelation about a distant future. Some arrive as urgent warnings, and if the recipient fails to act in time, the consequences can be catastrophic and irreversible. One of the clearest examples is the story of Abimelech, king of Gerar. When Abraham brought his wife Sarah into that land, and, out of fear for his life, claimed that she was his sister, Abimelech had her taken into his household. But before he could touch her, God came to him in a dream at night and spoke plainly. He was as good as dead because the woman he had taken was another man's wife. Abimelech awoke in terror, and early the next morning he returned Sarah to Abraham. That dream stopped a sin before it could happen, and spared an entire kingdom from the punishment that would have followed. Perhaps the most well-known warning dream in the Bible, however, is the one given to the wise men from the East, often called the Magi, in the story of Jesus' birth. After they visited the child Jesus in Bethlehem, King Herod instructed them to return and tell him where the child was, claiming that he too wished to worship him. But that night they were warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, so they returned to their own country by another route. That brief dream saved the life of the child for whom all of human history had been waiting. Immediately afterward, Joseph, the earthly father of Jesus, received a similar warning. An angel appeared to him in a dream and told him to take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt at once, because Herod was about to search for the child to kill him. Joseph woke up in the middle of the night and left without delay. He did not wait until morning, did not make elaborate preparations. He simply did what the dream commanded. And indeed, Herod soon ordered the killing of all male children under 2 years old in Bethlehem and the surrounding region in a horrific massacre. What all these warning dreams have in common is that those who received them acted immediately, without hesitation. They did not ask for more proof or demand time to reflect. The urgency within the dream itself was enough to move them to action. And that may be the message these stories have carried across thousands of years. Sometimes the most important warnings come while we sleep, and what matters just as much is whether, upon waking, we have the courage to obey. Part 5. The Dreams of Daniel and King Nebuchadnezzar. When a dream carries the fate of empires. If Joseph was the greatest interpreter of dreams in the Old Testament, then Daniel is his worthy successor, yet with a task far more difficult. Daniel was not only asked to interpret a dream, but to recount its exact content without ever having heard it beforehand. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon was one of the most powerful rulers the ancient world had ever seen. He conquered Jerusalem, destroyed the temple of the Jews, and led thousands into exile. But one night he was troubled by a dream so disturbing that he awoke unable to remember its details, knowing only that it had left him with a deep, unshakable sense of dread. He summoned all the wise men, magicians, and astrologers of his kingdom, but gave them an impossible demand. They had to tell him what the dream was before explaining its meaning. If they failed, they would all be executed. No one could do it, and the execution order began to be carried out, including against Daniel and his young Jewish companions serving in the court. That night, Daniel and his friends prayed, and in a vision during the night, God revealed to him the full content of the king's dream. The next morning, Daniel stood before Nebuchadnezzar and began to describe it in precise detail. A Zim statue with a head of pure gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet partly of iron and partly of clay. Then a stone, not cut by human hands, struck the statue at its feet, shattering it completely, reducing it to dust, while the stone itself grew until it filled the whole earth. Nebuchadnezzar fell face down before Daniel, and for the first time in history, the most powerful king in the world confessed that the God of the Jews is the God of gods and the Lord of kings, the one who reveals mysteries. That dream not only saved Daniel's life, but also laid out the entire map of the empires that would rise and fall across history, from Babylon to Persia to Greece to Rome, and finally to a kingdom that would never be destroyed, standing forever. In a single dream, the sweep of human history was revealed. Conclusion: when sleep becomes a gateway to eternity. Looking back on the entire journey, from Abraham's first dream to Daniel's visions, we begin to notice something remarkable. In the Bible, God does not only speak to people when they are awake and ready to listen. He often chooses the quietest moments, the hours when people have let go of their worries and defenses, to speak the things that matter most. There is a common thread running through all these dreams that few people notice. None of them, from Jacob on the run, to Joseph in prison, to the wise men on their journey home, were preparing themselves to receive a message from heaven. They were not fasting, not praying through the night, not doing anything extraordinary. They were simply asleep. And it was in that stillness that the extraordinary happened. It reminds us that the most ordinary moments in life are sometimes the very places where the miraculous chooses to appear. A night's rest by the roadside, a restless sleep in a prison cell, a vague dream that makes no sense in the morning, all of these can become a doorway to something far greater than what the eyes can see. The Bible does not say that every dream is a message from God, but it makes one thing clear. When He chooses to speak, He can use anything, even dreams in the darkness of night, to change a life, or even the course of human history. And who knows, tonight, when you close your eyes, something may be waiting to speak to you.